This series is brought to you in association with FreeQuranEducation, and I will be sharing these lessons regularly on FreeQuranEducation with you. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ashraf, and I am a Muslim from an Arab country. For this, I speak Arabic fluently. I also speak French and English. In this series, I want to help my Muslim brothers and sisters who do not speak Arabic, or even non-Muslims who want to read the Quran and learn Arabic. I want to help them to understand the Holy Quran and learn the Arabic language at the same time. First, you have to keep this in mind. All words in Arabic fall into three types. The first is ism, means everything related to nouns or pronouns. The second one is fi'l, verb. It includes all different conjugations and tenses. The last one is harf. We can translate it to a particle, and it includes most English prepositions. And under each of these types falls many subtypes that we will explain as we read the verses together. Let's begin. على بركة الله تعالى. First one is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Note that we can divide this verse into two parts, and this includes all verses of the Quran. The first part, the consonants, and the second one, the diacritics. The consonants are the main letters that establishes the Arabic alphabet. And unlike the English language, where the vowels are placed in front of the consonants, in the Arabic language, you put marks above or below them, and we can call them harakat or diacritics. They play the role of short vowels and sometimes long vowels. There are 5 main diacritics. 3 of them are short vowels. The first one is kasra, a small diagonal line placed below a letter and represents a short E, as in the word me or be. The second one is fatha, a small diagonal line placed above a letter and represents a short A, as in the word cat. The third one is dhamma, a small curl-like diacritic placed above a letter and represents a short U, as in duke or you. The fourth one is sukoon, a circle-shaped diacritic placed above a letter, and it indicates that the consonant to which it is attached is not followed by a vowel. The last one is shadda, a diacritic shaped like a small written Latin W, or Arabic sin. When two similar letters meet with each other, with the first having a sukoon above it, and the second having any of the 3 other vowels, we merge those 2 letters into one letter, and we put shadda above it, and we put that second vowel above the shadda. Then we read with some pressure on it. And now I think you are able to read verses of the Quran easier than before. So let's understand together. The first word is Bismi. This word is a combination between a preposition and a noun. The preposition is the letter B with a kasra under it. It often means by, like when you sign a letter by your name. You write by Muhammad or by Dawood. This preposition must come before a noun, not a verb. In Arabic we call it harfu jar. The noun ism means name, like my name, your name. So the first word, bismi, means by name or in name. Notice that the noun ism after the preposition be has a kasra as a last vowel. So any noun that comes after be should have the kasra as a last vowel. And we call that noun that comes after the preposition be by a genitive noun or ismun majroor in Arabic. Alright, by the name of who or in name of who? The answer to this question leads us to the second word, Allah. Allah is a proper noun. So we read Bismillah, and it means by the name of Allah or in the name of Allah. Keep this in mind. Any Arabic noun or verb has a root of 3 original letters, like an origin, which you can derive other nouns or other adjectives or even verbs from. Let me give you an example. The word Ar-Rahman, its root is Ra, Ha, Mim. Those are the original letters of that word. We can make verbs by those letters. And the most famous verb is Rahima, to be merciful toward. Also, we can make nouns. And I think you guessed it. A famous noun is Ar-Rahmah, the mercy. See, you just add some other letters to the root to create another word, but with similar meaning. So what is Ar-Rahman? It should be something close to the word mercy, right? Ar-Rahman means that the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal encompasses all the creatures without exception. So we translate it as the entirely merciful, and so automatically it is an adjective. What about Ar-Rahim? It has also the same root. Notice the 3 letters, but it is a different word, so it should have a different meaning, but also close to the word mercy. The word Ar-Rahim originates from Ar-Rahim before it returns to what it is now. Ar-Rahim is an active participle, or ismu fa'il in Arabic, and this adjective is given to anyone who has mercy on others. But because Allah gives a special mercy to His faithful servants, عِبَادُهُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, so instead of calling Himself just Ar-Rahim, He called Himself Ar-Rahim, which gives this adjective more intensity, and we translate the word by the especially merciful. The whole verse becomes Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. A quick reminder from the last lesson. I refer to any noun, pronoun, or adjective listed under ism by this red color, and to any verb listed under fi'l by this blue color, and finally to any particle or preposition listed under harf by this green color. In today's lesson, I'm going to introduce a golden rule that everyone should know before advancing in learning Arabic and reading Quran. And to get to this golden rule, we have to go through 3 phases. 1. Al, the definite article, alif lam at-ta'rif. 2. Solar and lunar letters, al-huruf al-shamsiyyah wal-qamariyah. 3. And finally the hamza, which attaches, connects, or joins, hamzatul wasl. Let's start. على بركة الله تعالى. Nouns in English and in Arabic have many similarities between them. One of them is the indefinite noun, or ismu nakira. The indefinite noun is a noun that refers to a non-specific entity. I'm gonna buy a t-shirt. If you want to definite this noun, you simply add the before it. I'm gonna buy the t-shirt. Arabic has exactly the same definite article that you put before a noun. The same previous sentence in Arabic is سأشتري قميص. The word قميص here means t-shirt in Arabic. Nouns are indefinite by nature, so how can we make them definite? We simply add alif plus lam, al, at the beginning of the noun. سأشتري القميص. See, so simple. Without el in the first, the noun is indefinite. With el, the noun is definite. Here are some examples. Muslim, al-Muslim, dawla, ad-dawla. We call this al by al-ta'rif. It is a particle, or harf, and you will never find this al standing alone like the English the. It should always be prefixed to another noun. But if you notice the examples that I gave you, al-Muslim and ad-dawla, in the first noun we pronounced the full al, but in the second one we pronounced only the alif of al, and we skipped the lam. We can divide Arabic letters into two parts. The first part are those where we pronounce the whole al that is prefixed with them. We call them lunar letters, al-huruf al-qamariyah. And the second are those where we do not pronounce the lam of al that is prefixed with them. We call them solar letters, al-huruf al-shamsiyah. Those letters have no relations with the sun and the moon. We call them by those names because the word qamar, which means moon, starts with the letter that belongs to the first section, and the word shams, which means sun, starts with the letter that belongs to the second section. Let's try to add al to some nouns, starting by lunar letters to verify our theory. Haya, al-haya. Maut, al-maut. Hawa, al-hawa. See, here we pronounce the whole al. Let's try with the solar letters. Naum, an-naum. Daw, ad-daw. Rahim, ar-rahim. Here, we only pronounce the first letter of al, that is, alif, and we skip the lam to pronounce directly the solar letter. But pay attention, we must pronounce the solar letter after alif with some pressure. Means we have to put shadda above it. I will put nouns that starts with different letters from both sections and let you practice the pronunciation at your own. If all the nouns are pronounced correctly, you have passed the pronunciation test for Arabic. Next, how can we deal with al amid of the sentence? We were able to know that al is an extra tool added at the beginning of a noun, and it is not from its origin letters. That is why we have to treat it differently. Here I have two situations. Al is prefixed to a noun at the beginning of the phrase, and al is prefixed to a noun at the mid of a phrase. For the first situation, things are easy. We're just going to put fatha above alif to pronounce the whole noun normally with either full al or the alif skipping lam, depends on the first letter of the noun. I mean solar or lunar. For the second situation, when al is prefixed to a noun at the mid of a phrase, we shouldn't pronounce the first alif, and we have to get past it to pronounce the letter after it, either lam in the lunar letter case or the first letter of the noun in the solar letter case. And we call this alif in al by the hamza which connects, or hamza to wasl in Arabic. So instead of putting fatha above it, we put this diacritic, and it literally means just ignore me. So whenever you see this diacritic above a letter, just ignore that letter. Finally, that takes us to the most important question in this lesson. If we have to ignore this alif of al in the mid of a phrase, why don't we ignore it in the first of a phrase and we instead pronounce it normally? And the answer will lead us directly to our golden rule. Our golden rule says any Arabic phrase can't start with a sukoon and can't end with a short vowel. That means every Arabic phrase should necessarily start with a short vowel and finish with a sukoon. So if we ignore the alif in al in the first of a phrase, we are going to unfortunately break our golden rule, and we would be forced to pronounce the lam, which has a sukoon above it, or even the letter that comes after, the one which has shadda above it. And remember, shadda is a combination of two letters. The first has a sukoon above it, and the second has any of the other short vowels. Let's apply all what we learned today to our Bismillah. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. We don't read Bismi, Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahimi, but we read Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Even the kasra in the last letter of the verse should turn to a sukoon. First, we should know what does the word Al-Fatiha mean. The direct translation is the opener, but that will not help you to build your own words. That's why I have to cut it into parts. Let's start. على بركة الله تعالى. We can split the word Al-Fatiha into smaller parts. Al, the definite article that we explained the previous lesson, and it is not from the origin of the word. This bound character is a special version of the letter ta, but different from it, because it has to be added only in the end of a word, neither at its beginning nor in its middle. This character indicates that al-ism, the noun or the adjective that suffixes it, is feminine. Of course, you will never see it stuck to a verb, and we call it the tied ta, or at-ta'ul marbuta. If the tied ta is in the middle of a phrase, we pronounce it normally like any other ta. But if it is in the end of a phrase, we should apply our golden rule. So we have to pronounce it with a sukoon above it. But because it is not from the origin of the noun, we should treat it differently. So we pronounce it like ha. So we write al-fatihat, but we read it al-fatiha. See? Ha instead of ta. So what keeps to us is the word fatih. As I said in the first video, every ism or fi'l in Arabic has origins, and from those origins you can make either verbs, nouns, or adjectives. And because we build almost anything in Arabic based on those origins, I'm going to call them roots or al-judhur. But how can we distinguish the roots of a word from the other letters? There is one way to know. If you try to remove one of them, either the meaning of the word will disappear or it will completely change to a different meaning. For example, the word Ar-Rahim in Al-Basmalah, its roots are Ra, Ha, Mim. But how did I know? Well, first, let's remove the additions that we knew together, like El in the beginning. It remains for us just the word Rahim. Let's remove another letter, like the last one, Mim. The word will be Rahi, but Rahi has no meaning in Arabic, so Mim is an irreplaceable letter. Let's try another one. The first one, Ra. Then what remains is Him. But Him also has no meaning in Arabic, so Ra is an irreplaceable letter as well. Let's try to remove Ha. What remains is Rim. Well, Rim has a meaning in Arabic. It is a proper noun for girls that means gazelle, but this meaning has no relation to do with the original meaning of the word, Rahim, the especially merciful. Likewise, Ha is an irreplaceable letter. The last letter to try to remove is Ya. What remains is Rahima. Well, Rahima is a verb that means to be merciful toward. Aha! Now we have a verb that has the same meaning of our original word, Rahim, but with a little difference. So the roots of Rahim are Ra, Ha, Mim. Let's apply this to the rest of Al-Fatiha. First letter to remove is Fa. What remains is At, and there is no such word in Arabic. So Fa is an irreplaceable letter. Let's remove the letter in the end. Ha. What remains is fat. This is a verb which means to be past or to expire, but it has no relation with the meaning of Al-Fatiha that I mentioned in the first of the video. So, ha is an irreplaceable letter. Let's remove the letter ta. What remains is fah, which is a verb that means spread a strong odor, like what happens with flowers, and that likewise has no relation to the original meaning of Al-Fatiha. So, ta is an irreplaceable letter. Then the last letter is alif. If we remove it, what remains is the word fataha, and this is a verb which means to open. Oh, that is close to the opener, the original meaning of Al-Fatiha. Aha! So the roots of fatih are fa, ta, ha. We can make a verb by these roots, like iftataha, which means to start or to open a startup. We can also make nouns like fath, and one of the most famous Islamic figures in history is Muhammad the Conqueror, or Muhammadul Fatih. I guess you got the idea. The next question to clarify is why we add this alif amongst the roots. Good question. Let's give some verbs. There are some remarks here. To distinguish between a verb and a noun, we apply the golden rule to the noun, but we do not apply it to the verb. So we keep a short vowel in the end of the verb. But this is just a special case when we are talking about verbs out of their contexts. However, inside a context, the golden rule works normally. The second remark is that the infinitive form of any Arabic verb is conjugated at the past tense of the pronoun he. So when I take a verb out of its context, like hamida, I actually mean the verb to praise, but it can mean at the same time he praises, and it's the same for any other verb. The last remark is all the verbs that I gave you in this example consists of 3 letters, and this is the smallest number of letters in which verbs can be formed in Arabic. But we can form verbs with 4, 5, and 6 letters, and there is no verb that can be formed with 7 or more letters. So the shortest verbs in Arabic consists of 3 letters, and the longest consists of 6 letters. Let's try to add alif after the first letter of each of those verbs. Hamida, to praise. Hamid, a praiser. Abad, to worship. Abid, a worshipper. Haluma, to dream. Halim, a dreamer. And finally, fa'ala, to do. Fa'il, a doer. So, adding an alif as a second character to a verb which consists of 3 letters turns it into a noun, and even more than that, to an agent noun, or to an active participle. I mean the one who does this verb or this action. Its name in Arabic is ismu fa'il. So, fatih means someone or something that introduces or starts or opens. And because we already know what is this thing which opens the chapter or a surah, so we add the definite article al in the first, and it becomes Al-Fatih. And because the word surah is feminine, so we add the tied ta in the end to finally become Al-Fatiha, the opener, or Suratul Fatiha, the opening chapter, because it is the first chapter or surah of the Quran. For more understanding to Surah Al-Fatiha, we must discover together new things about the Arabic letters, or Al-Huruf Al-Arabiyyah. That's why I am going to return in this lesson to the basics. So let's start. على بركة الله تعالى. In the Arabic language, there are 28 diverse letters. All of them are normal except for 3 letters, waw, alif, and ya. These 3 can play the role of consonants and of vowels at the same time. But when would they be consonants and when would they be vowels? I'm going to give examples for both cases. In the right side, the 3 letters are consonants, and to know this, we put diacritics above them. The first is yawm, as in Maliki Yawmiddin, and it contains ya and waw, and both of them are consonants. That's why we put short vowels above each of them. Fatha above ya and sukoon above waw. The second is ihdina, as in ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. It contains alif in the first. This alif here is a hamza which connects, or hamzatu wasl. So in the normal cases, we should ignore it. But because it is in the first of a phrase, we should put a short vowel above it and not to start with a sukoon. Remember the golden rules lesson? So here we put kesra under this alif. The third is an'amta. Here we have alif plus short character above it. This short character, we call it the hamza which breaks, or hamzatul qata. This hamza, unlike the other hamza, the one which connects, you should never ignore it. And whenever you see it, you have to pronounce it, either in the first, in the mid, or in the end of a phrase. And the character which holds this hamza is always a consonant and never becomes a vowel. You could see it above an alif, like in an'amta, below an alif, like iyyaka in iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You could see it above a waw, like mu'min, and above a ya, without its 2 points, like sa'il. And finally, you could find it on the line, like ja'a. And I'll make a special lesson about it, insha'Allahu ta'ala. In the left side, the 3 letters are vowels. To know this, we do not put anything above or below them. Let's start with the first example, Rahim. Here we have ya with nothing above it, and the letter before it, which is ha, has a kesra below it. So actually, we do not pronounce the ya, but we pronounce the letter before it, ha, with extending the kesra. It's not rahim, it's rahim. The second example is Fatiha. Here we have alif with nothing above it, and the letter before it, which is fa, has a fatha above it. So also we do not pronounce the alif, but the letter before it, fa, with extending the fatha. It's not fatha, it's fatiha. The last example is maghdoob, as in غير المغضوب عليهم. Here we have waw with nothing above it, and the letter before it, which is dad, has a dhamma above it. Likewise, we do not pronounce the waw, but the letter before it, dad, with extending the dhamma. It's not maghdub, it's maghdoob. In Arabic, we call these 3 letters by weak letters, or huruful illah, and they are so important that you can find them at any verse in the Quran. And any Arabic verb has one of them as a root. We call it a weak verb, or fi'lun mu'tal. Also, I'll make a special lesson about those verbs, insha'Allahu ta'ala. And if these weak letters take their place as vowels, like in the left side examples, we call them long vowels, in order to distinguish them from the short vowels. Finally, we consider the long vowel as a quiet letter, I mean a letter that we can end the phrase by without breaking our golden rule, but just long vowels, not short vowels. An example from the Noble Quran is قَالَ رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي. Also from the same surah, إِنَّمَا تَقْضِي هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. See, we can end the verse or the phrase by a long vowel normally. The first ayah of the Quran is the first ayah of Surah Al Fatihah. Al-Hamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. What does every word in this verse mean? And how can you use your understanding of the verses to build your own words? Let's answer these questions. على بركة الله تعالى. The first word in this verse is Alhamdu. It is a combination of the definite article al and the noun hamd. In Arabic, almost every noun has a root of 3 letters. There are some rare cases when you can find a noun that has a root of 4 letters or more. Anyway, the word hamd consists of 3 letters. So automatically, those 3 letters are its roots. But what does hamd mean? Hamd is a word that means a praise. You can make verbs by those 3 letters, like hamida. We can make an adjective participle from this verb, hamid. We can make another verb like hamada, which means to praise highly. And the name Muhammad was derived from this last verb. So, alhamd means the praise. But the praise to whom? To Allah, right? And that's the next word, lillah. It means literally to Allah. So it is a combination of 2 words. Li is a lam with a kesra below it. And it is a preposition, or harf, which means to. This preposition is always prefixed to a noun, and the noun that comes after li must also end with a kesra. So the noun Allah here is ending with kesra. We call the preposition li in Arabic by harfu jar, and the noun that comes after it, we call it ismun majroor, like bismi in Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Check the episode of the meaning of Bismillah. So now we have 2 harfu jar in our repertory. Bi, which means by, and li, which means to. Then Alhamdulillah means literally the praise to Allah. But a professional translation is all praise is due to Allah. The next word is Rabbi. Here we have a noun with the root of 3 letters. Wait, but I see just 2. Don't ever forget the shadda. The shadda is a fusion of 2 similar letters. And here the shadda is above ba. So actually we should write it in this way, Rabbi. But because of the heaviness of pronouncing such a word, we merge those 2 letters into one and we put shadda above it. So the roots of Rabb are Ra, Ba, Ba. This word alone means the carefulness and the control, but usually you can't find it alone. Always a noun comes after it. If you call someone by Rabb of something, so you mean that this person is master of this thing, or his owner, like Rabbul Bayti, master of the house, who is often the father. So it is a masculine adjective. If she is the mother, we call it Rabbatul Bayti. Also means master of the house, but because mother is feminine, we add at-ta'ul marbuta, or the tied ta in the end. Check the episode of Introduction to Surah Al Fatihah. So when Allah describes himself by this word, he means that he is a master, a lord. A lord of what? The answer to this question leads us to the last word, Al-Alamin. Al-Alamin is a combination of two words, Al, which is a definite article, and Alamin. Alamin is the plural of the noun alam, so we add ya and noon to its end to indicate that it is plural. This way of converting singular nouns to plural is called by the sound masculine plural, or jam'u mudhakkarin salim. If the noun in its singular form ends with a dhamma, then its plural form should end with a waw and noon, like al-alamu in singular form and al-alamun in plural form. And if the noun in its singular form ends with a fatha or a kasra, then its plural form should end with a ya and noon, like al-alama in singular form, al-alamin in plural form, and al-alami in singular form is also al-alamin in plural form. To know whether or not this way should be used, some conditions must be met. First, the noun should be proper. Second, the noun should be masculine. Third, the noun should be for a rational, for a human being. Fourth, the noun should not have a tied ta in its end. And finally, the noun should not be compound. And if we want to use this method for an adjective, this adjective should be masculine and for a rational. An example for a noun is Ahmed. This is a proper noun, masculine, for a human being. It doesn't have a tied ta in its end, and finally, it is not compound. So I can use the sound masculine plural, and then its plural form becomes Ahmedun. Another example is Zaid. This is a proper noun, masculine, for a human being. It doesn't have a tied ta in its end, and finally, it is not compound. Likewise, I can use this method, and its plural form becomes Zaydun. Examples for adjectives are mashhur, muhazzab, and najih. They are masculine and for rational, for human being, so their plural forms are mashhurun, muhazzabun, and najihun. Returning back to al-alamin, this noun doesn't meet all the conditions. So why did we use this way to make it plural? The answer is that this noun is one of the 7 special cases that we can make them plural by this way, always. So the whole verse means, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. And we read it, Al-Hamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I already gave a full explanation to these 2 adjectives, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, in the lesson of what Bismillah really means. In this lesson, I'm going to explain why do we add some letters to the roots and what is their significance. Let's start. على بركة الله تعالى. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are 2 active participles that respectively means the entirely merciful and the especially merciful. So both of them are derived from a root that is related to Ar-Rahmah, the mercy, right? Can you guess what is it? The 3 letters that are repeated in each of those words will automatically be the roots that we are seeking. So they are Ha, Ra, and Mim. Of course, A verb from this root is rahima, to be merciful toward. Also, one of the wonders of the Arabic language is that the noun rahim has two meanings. The first is womb, and it is named with this name that has a relation with ar-rahmah, the mercy, because the fetus inside the womb is preserved from everything and even eats, drinks, and breathes inside it with all safety. The second meaning is kinship. I mean the relations with everyone that belongs to the big family: parents, siblings, uncles, aunties, cousins, and so on. And these kinds of relations in Islam has a major importance. It means you must always have mercy towards your big family by visiting them, supporting them, and asking about them. And we call this fact in Arabic by Silatul Rahim, kinship ties. Let's go back to the verb rahima. In the lesson of Introduction to Surah Al Fatihah, I said that any Arabic verb that consists of 3 letters, you can make it an adjective participle if you add alif as a second letter. So, rahima is a verb that consists of 3 letters. If I add alif as a second letter, I'll have a rahim, and it is an active participle. That means the one that has mercy towards others. Let's take other examples. If you notice, all those verbs consists of 3 letters, and their second letters has a kasra under them in their infinitive form. The active participle, ghadib, means the one who is angry. But what if this person is angry about everything? In this case, we say instead of ghadib that he is غضبان. The active participle, عاطش, means the one who is thirsty. But what if this person was walking in the desert for days without water, so all his body was thirsty? Then we say instead of عاطش that he is عطشان. The active participle, تعب, means the one who is tired. But what if this person was working extra hours without stopping, so every part of him was tired? We say instead of تعب that he is تعبان. The active participle, فرح, means the one who is happy. What if this person's birthday coincides with the day he graduated from college? Instead of saying فرح, we say he is فرحان. And finally, what if Allah Ta'ala did not monopolize His mercy for some people, but rather included all the creatures without exception? We say instead of Rahim that He is Rahman. That's why Allah Ta'ala is the only one who must be called by this word, and that's exactly what its translation means, the entirely merciful. So adding alif and noon in the end to a 3 letters verb that has a kasra under its second letter means that you turn this verb not only to an active participle, but also with an expansiveness. What about rahim? Let's also give examples. If you notice, all those verbs consists of 3 letters, and their second letters has either a kasra under them or a dhamma above them in their infinitive form. But what if a person in particular is closer to you more than the others, either physically or emotionally? Then we say instead of qarib, he is qareeb. What if this person is generally sad, but he is sadder about a specific thing? We say he is hazin instead of hazin. What if this person is generally happy, but he is happier about a specific thing? We say instead of sa'id that he is sa'id. What if this person is generally beautiful, but for example his beard in particular makes him more beautiful? So instead of jamil, we say he is jamil. And finally, what if Allah Ta'ala is generally merciful, but He is more merciful with His faithful servants? We say instead of Rahim that He is Rahim. And that's exactly what its translation means. The especially merciful. The first word of this verse could be read Maliki and could be read Maliki. But why is there such a difference in the readings? And which one is more correct? Let's answer these questions. على بركة الله تعالى. When the Quran was still revealed through revelation, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, asked some of his companions either to memorize the revelation or to write it down. The first time Quran was written by a companion, Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, was without diacritics, without points above and below letters, and sometimes even without long vowels. This is how Arabs used to write Arabic at the time. However, after years of conquests, many non-Arabs entered Islam, but they found difficulties when they wanted to read the Quran the way it was written. That's why some grammarians added diacritics and points above and below letters to make it easier to read it. The problem wasn't the long vowels. For example, the word Al-Alamin in Al-Hamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. You'll find it in the Quran like that, without this long vowel after Ain. So normally it should be pronounced as Al-Alamin, not Al-Alamin. But Al-Alamin has no meaning in Arabic. Arabs had no problems with that. They could read it correctly even if it was written in such a way. But non-Arabs had this problem. Some of you now are thinking, oh, but grammarians could just add this long vowel and the problem is solved. The Arabs say about that, this is how the Quran was written during the era of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he accepted it as it is, so we will never change it later. Then instead, they added a special character after Ain, without changing how the word was written. This little alif here is called al-aliful khinjariyya, or the dagger alif, because its shape resembles a small dagger. Now everyone can read this word correctly, al-alamin. The same story was repeated with ar-Rahman. If you read this word without the long vowel after mim, it becomes ar-Rahman. But this word has no meaning in Arabic, and they didn't want to change how this word was written the first time. So they added the dagger alif after mim, and now everyone can read this word correctly, ar-Rahman. The same story was repeated also with Maliki, but here things are a little bit trickier, because the word Maliki has really a meaning, which is a king, but some readers thought that they should add this dagger alif as well as they did with Al-Alamin and Ar-Rahman, so they read it Maliki, which is an active participle that means the one who possesses, owns, or masters, and this derives from the verb malaka, which means to master or take possession. So, malaka shay'a means to take possession of the thing or to master the thing, while the noun milk means ownership or property. But the word malik, which also is an active participle, which means the one who reigns, who is here the king or the sovereign, is derived from the verb meluka and not malaka, which means to reign or to rule, like meluka al-mamlakata, to reign the kingdom, and the noun mulk means the reign. So which one is correct? Well, both of the readings are correct, but some linguists say that the sovereign, or the king, reigns and possesses, but the master can only possess and not necessarily to reign, so they prefer melik over malik. Wallahu a'lam. The sovereign of what? Of yawm. What does yawm mean? It is a noun that means a day, so Yawmul Khamis is the day of Thursday. Yawmul Jumu'ah is the day of Friday. Yawmul Milad is the day of birth, and so forth. The sovereign of the day. Which day exactly? Here comes the last word, ad-din. Here we have the definite article, el, plus the word din. The roots of this word are dal, ya, and noon, and from them the word diyana, creed or religion, was made. So the word din sometimes means obedience and sometimes means recompense, and in this verse it holds the second meaning. Then the whole verse is Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of recompense, or Maliki Yawmiddin, the sovereign of the day of recompense. In Arabic, there are two types of sentences. The first one is the nominal sentence, or Jumlatun Ismiya. It has to start either with a noun, a pronoun, or a noun phrase, and we call this first word by subject, or mubtada, and it means what the sentence is talking about, the topic. If it comes as a noun, it has necessarily to end with a dhamma. This nominal sentence has to consist also of a predicate, or khabar, and it tells us something about the subject, like a comment. It may come as a noun, as a preposition with a noun, as a verb, or as a nominal and verbal sentence, and it may be visible or hidden. Sometimes you can find more than one predicate in one nominal sentence, and some other times you can switch between the subject and the predicate with no changing of the meaning. If the predicate comes as a visible noun, also it has to end necessarily with a dhamma. Example is al-wujuhu na'imatun. Here, al-wujuh means the faces. It is a noun, so this sentence is nominal because it starts with a noun. The word na'imatun is an active participle that means joyful. This sentence is talking about al-wujuh, the faces. This is the subject. And notice that it ends with a dhamma, and the word na'imatun describes how these faces are. It tells something about the subject. Then, na'imatun is the predicate. It also ends with a dhamma. The second type of sentences is the verbal sentence, or jumlatun fi'liya. It has to start with a verb in any tense, and this verb has to be followed by a subject, or a doer, fa'il, the one who does the verb. It may come as a noun, a pronoun, and may be visible or hidden. In some cases, you can find this doer followed by a direct object, maf'ulun bih, which is the person or the thing affected by the verb. And also, it may come as a noun, a pronoun, and may be visible or hidden. And in some other cases, you can switch between the subject and the object with no changing of the meaning. Example, يَعْبُدُ الْمُؤْمِنُ اللَّهَ. Here, يَعْبُدُ is the verb عَبَدَ, to worship, in the present tense. So this sentence is verbal because it starts with a verb. Who is the one who does this verb? It is al-mu'min, the believer. So al-mu'min is the doer, the subject, al-fa'il. Note that if al-fa'il comes as a visible noun, like here, al-mu'min, it has always to end with dhamma, always. Alright, the believer worships. Worships whom? Worships Allah. So Allah here is the object, or al-maf'ulu bih. Also notice that if al-maf'ulu bih comes as a visible noun, like Allah here, it has always to end with a fatha, always. After covering the two major sentences in Arabic, we have to talk about different types of pronouns. First, we are going to address two types of pronouns, the separate pronoun, or الضمير المنفصل, and the attached pronoun, or الضمير المتصل. As their names indicate, one of them should be separated, mean stays alone, and the other should be attached to a word, either a verb, noun, or a preposition. Let's give examples. The verb عبد means to worship. If I want to conjugate it, I would need separate pronouns to play the role of the subject, like I, you, he, she, and so forth. In English, there are 8 separate pronouns that play this role, but in Arabic there are 12. Fortunately, in Arabic there exists only 3 tenses: the past, al-madi, the present, al-mudari', and the future, al-mustaqbal. And today we are concerned only by the present tense, al-mudari'. The first separate pronoun is ana, I. To conjugate the verb عبد in the present, I say أنا أعبد. Notice that I prefix the verb by alif with hamza to indicate that I talk about me, about myself. Next one is أنت, you, for singular masculine, for one man. I say أنت تعبد. Notice that I prefix the verb by ta to indicate that I talk to you, and left it with no suffixes to indicate that you are one male. But because there is you for male, it should exist you for female. It is anti for singular feminine, one woman. So we say anti ta'budina. See the difference between male and female? For male, we add only ta in the first of the verb, but for female, we add ta in the first to indicate that I talk to you, and ya and noon in the end to indicate that you are one female. This ya and noon is an attached pronoun. Question: the letters that we prefix to verbs, are they considered as attached pronouns? The answer is no. The attached pronouns must always come in the end of a word, either verb, noun, or preposition. In Arabic, there exists pronoun for dual you. I mean for 2 persons, like 2 men or 2 women. This pronoun is أنتما, so we say أنتما تعبدان. Notice that we add ta in the first to indicate that I talk to you, and alif and noon in the end to indicate that you are 2 persons, either male or female. Let's move to he. The corresponding pronoun is huwa, and we say huwa ya'budu. So here we add ya in the first of the verb to indicate that I talk about him, and left it with no suffixes. What about she? The corresponding pronoun is hiya, and we say hiya ta'budu. It is similar to anta, you for male, so you should make the difference based on the context of the sentence. However, as there is you for 2 persons, there is he for 2 males also, and she for 2 females. For male we say huma. We say huma ya'budani. We add ya in the first to indicate that I talk about them but males, and alif and noon in the end to indicate that they are 2 persons. For females, we also say huma, but we say huma ta'budani. So the verb is prefixed with ta to indicate that I talk about them but females, and alif and noon in the end to indicate that they are 2 persons. Next one is nahnu, which means we. we say نحن نعبد. So we prefix the verb by nun to indicate that I talk about us. Next one is أنتم, which means you for plural masculine. I mean plural males, a group of men. So we say أنتم تعبدون. We add ta in the first to indicate that I talk to you, and waw and nun in the end to indicate that you are a group of men. Of course, it should exist you for plural feminine, plural females, a group of women. So this you is أنتن, and we say أنتن تعبدن. We add ta in the first to indicate that I talk to you, and nun in the end to indicate that you are a group of women. Finally, we got the last one, they. We also have they for male and female. For male, it is hum, and we say hum ya'budun. We add ya in the first to indicate that I talk about them, and waw and nun in the end to indicate that they are a group of men. For female, it is hunna, and we say hunna ya'budna. We add ya in the first to indicate that I talk about them, and nun in the end to indicate that they are a group of women. This way of conjugating in present tense, al-mudari' is not limited only to this verb, but to any other Arabic verb. Let's make some remarks. The first person, the speaker, like talking about me and about us. The pronouns concerning first person are أنا and نحن, I and we. The second person, I mean the one spoken to, the one we address the speech to, which are أنت, you for singular male, أنتِ, you for singular female, أنتما, you for dual male and or female, أنتم for plural male, and أنتن for plural female. The third person, I mean the one spoken about, the one that is not present with us, and they are هو, which is he, هي, which is she, هما, they, for dual male and or female, hum, they, for plural male, and hunna, they, for plural female. Those pronouns can take the place of the subject in a nominal or verbal sentence. So, for instance, نحن نعبد الله means we worship Allah, but word by word means we worship Allah. So it's not necessary to say نحن every time, because this nun prefix to a verb in the present tense plays the same role of the separate pronoun نحن. That's why no need to repeat it. I can simply say نعبد الله. Of course, Allah is the object of this verbal sentence. However, because these separate pronouns play the role of the subject in the phrase, we call them subject-separate pronouns. First, let's conjugate the verb خاطب to address in al-mudari', the present tense, by applying what we learned in the previous lesson. The conjugation is we have 12 subject-separate pronouns and 4 subject-attached pronouns. Till now, I have only a verb and a subject, but what if I want to add an object, like addressing the kid? I simply add the kid, al-walad, after the verb and put fatha in its end to show that it is an object. But what if I want to say, I address you as a man? Here you suffix kaf with fatha to the verb and you say أنا أخاطبك. This works for all the other subject pronouns except for the second person because you can't address you. What about addressing you as a woman? Then we suffix kaf with kesra to the verb and it becomes أنا أخاطبك. And this works for all the other subject pronouns except for the second person. I think the pattern starts to be shown. That's why I'll leave you for a while with the other object pronouns. We call those suffixed letters by object-attached pronouns because they play the role of the object in a verbal sentence and they are attached to a verb. But because of the diversity of the Arabic language, I can also use separate pronouns rather than attached pronouns to play the same role. For now, if you want to say to someone, I address you alone, instead of saying أخاطبك, you say أخاطب إياك. So the separate pronoun إياك means you alone, even if the word alone is not shown, but it is understood. So when you decide to use this separate pronoun, means you want to focus the verb on one person, and to make it even further focused, and to give it more strength, you can switch between the verb and this separate pronoun to become إياك أخاطب. It is only you I address. Of course, the word only is not shown, but it is understood. Does this remind you of something? إياك نعبد. I'll leave you for a while with the other object-separate pronouns. There are several verses in the Quran when Allah Ta'ala uses those object-separate pronouns to refer to only Him, like وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ, and only me to be afraid of, or وَإِيَّايَ فَاتَّقُونَ, and only me to fear, and finally وَاشْكُرُوا لِلَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ إِيَّاهُ تَعْبُدُونَ, and be grateful to Allah if it is only Him that you worship. Returning back to إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, the question now is, how can I worship Allah? There are 5 types of cult in Islam. First, by oral, means worshipping Him by dua, istighfar, tasbih, and so forth. Second, by heart, means submitting to Him by good intention, asking Him for forgiveness, fearing Him, being patient on what He decides, thanking Him, believing in Him, being satisfied in everything He does, and so on. Third, by action, means praying, fasting, and doing pilgrimage, if it is possible. Fourth, by money, means giving zakat, alms, charities, and donations. Fifth, by body, means jihad. We're agreed that إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ has the same construction of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. It means it was originally نَسْتَعِينُ إِيَّاكَ, but switching the places of the verb نَسْتَعِينُ and the object-separate pronoun إِيَّاكَ gave the verse more strength and concentration on Allah Ta'ala. نَسْتَعِينُ is the verb استعان, conjugated in the present tense, al-mudari'. So instead of saying إِيَّاكَ نَحْنُ نَسْتَعِينُ, we shorten it by إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ because the subject marker, noon, prefixed to the verb, helps me detect which subject pronoun is used and which tense the verb is conjugated in. So whenever I see it prefixed to a verb, I know there is a hidden subject pronoun, we or نحن, and the verb is conjugated in the present tense, المضارع. The verb استعان means to ask for help. Its root letters are عين, alif, and noon. I'll give numbers to these roots to use them later. So I'll give 1 to the first, 2 to the second, and 3 to the third. The verb with the root letters is عانى, means to help completely. عانى القط بالماء means he helped the cat with water. Before moving forward, I have to remind you that alif, waw, and ya are 3 letters. We call them weak letters, and they can come as consonants and as long vowels. Also, I have to remind you that the shortest verb in Arabic has to consist of 3 letters, and the longest has to consist of 6 letters. You can never find a verb with 2 letters or a verb with 7 letters or more. Why did I remind you of that? Because I'm going to talk about different types of verbs that has 3 letters. The first type of verb is the one that has no weak letter between its roots and no repeated letter, like فعل. The letters that make up the root are fa, ain, and lam, or رحم. The root letters are ra, ha, and mim, or عبد. The root letters are ain, ba, and dal. All of them are consonants, and no one is repeated. We call this type of verbs by sound verbal roots, الفعل الصحيح السالم. The second type is the one where its second and third root letters are the same, and instead of repeating the same letter, we merge them into one and we put shadda above it, like dalla. The letters that make up the root are dal, lam, and lam, or hatta. The root letters are ha, ta, and ta, or tamma. The root letters are ta, mim, and mim. We have one root letter that is repeated twice in the end. That's why we merge them under a shadda. We call this type of verbs by doubled verbal roots, الفعل المضاعف. The third type is where any one of the root letters is a hamza, and it may occur as the first, second, or third, like akala. The root letters are alif with a hamza, kaf, and lam. Here we have the hamza as the first letter, or sa'ala. The root letters are sin, alif, with a hamza, and lam. Here the hamza is the second letter, or qara'a. The root letters are qaf, ra, and alif with a hamza. Here the hamza is the third letter. We call this type of verbs by hamzated verb roots, الفعل المهموز. The fourth type is where the first root letter is a weak letter, mostly waw or ya, like wasala. The root letters are waw, sad, and lam. Here we have waw as a first letter, or wajada. The root letters are waw, jim, and dal. Here also we have waw as a first letter, or yassara. The root letters are ya, sin, and ra. Here we have ya as a first letter. We call this type of verbs by assimilated verb roots, or الفعل المثال. The fifth type is where the second root letter is a weak letter, mostly alif, like qala. The root letters are qaf, alif, and lam, or aisha. The root letters are ayn, alif, and sheen, or nama. The root letters are noon, alif, and mim. Here we have alif as a second letter, and we call this type of verbs by hollow verb roots, al-fi'lu al-ajwaf. The sixth type is where the final root letter is a weak letter, mostly alif or ya, like bada. The root letters are ba, dal, and alif. Here we have alif in the end, or nasiya. The root letters are noon, sin, and ya. Here we have ya in the end, or kafa. The root letters are kaf, fa, and alif, with the shape of ya, with no points. This alif is called by the restricted alif, or al-aliful maqsura. It has to come in the end. In the future, insha'Allah ta'ala, I'll explain why we use it instead of the normal alif. Anyway, we call this type of verbs by defective verb roots, or al-fi'lu naqas. The verbs that consists at least one weak letter between their root letters are called weak verbs. I'll talk in the future, insha'Allah ta'ala, with more details why there are so many types of verbs that consist of 3 root letters. Returning to the verb ana, what type of verbs do you think it belongs to? Stop the video for a moment and try to answer. If you think you know the right answer, share it with us and write it down in the comments. So, why do we add those 3 letters, alif, sin, and ta, in the first of the verb, ana? What is their role? What is the difference between ana and ista'ana? Let's first agree that those 3 letters comes as a package that sticks to the beginning of a verb that consists of 3 letters. The pattern how to use this package is like that in the infinitive form. Those numbers are the root letters in order, and the pattern in the present tense in the third person, he, is like that. You only have to determine the root letters of a verb and put them in the place of 1, 2, and 3. There are many meanings that a verb can hold if these 3 letters are prefixed to it, but the most used is they make the verb requestative or estimative. Examples for estimative cases are the verb hasuna, which means to be good, and istahsana, which means to consider something or somebody good. Also the verb haqura means to be despicable, and istahqara means to consider something or somebody despicable. Examples for requestative cases are the verb ghafara, means to forgive, and istaghfara means to ask or request for forgiveness. The verb fahima is to understand, and istafhama means to ask or to request for understanding. Finally, the verb ana means to help, and the verb ista'ana means to ask or request for help. So, إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ means it is you we ask for help. How can I request help from Allah Ta'ala? He, Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, answers this question in the second surah, ayah number 45. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. And seek help through patience and prayer, and indeed, it is difficult, except for the humbly submissive. And also in the second surah, ayah number 153. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. O you who have believed, seek help through patience and prayer. Indeed, Allah is with the patient ones. So the best way to seek help from Allah Ta'ala is through patience and prayer. بالصبر والصلاة. In the last episode, I talked about 6 types of trilateral verbs. I mean verbs that consists of 3 letters. The one that all its root letters are consonants and different from each other, sound verbal roots. The one that its second and third root letters are the same, so we merge them and put shadda above the character, double verbal roots. The one that has a hamza between its root letters, hamzated verb roots. The one that starts with a weak letter, assimilated verb roots. The one that its middle letter is a weak letter, hollow verb roots. And the one that ends with a weak letter, defective verb roots. These last 3 types of verbs are the weak verbs. Today, I am concerned only by the last type, because it is the one that the verb hada belongs to. This verb ends with a weak letter, the restricted alif. And here comes the time to answer the question. What's the difference between the normal alif and the restricted alif? To answer this question, let's take another verb with hada that ends with the normal alif. A verb such as bada. Trying to conjugate these 2 verbs in the present tense in any subject-separate pronoun. Let's take, for example, ana, I. We say for the case of the verb hada, ana ahdi, and for the case of the verb bada, ana abdu. See the difference? For the first case, the restricted alif turns to ya, and for the second case, the normal alif turns to waw. Both the alifs have the same pronunciation, but the difference in shapes helps us to detect which alif we have to transform into ya while conjugating the verb, and which alif we have to transform into waw. Other examples are da'a and raja. Both of them ends with a normal alif. Conjugating them in the present tense in any subject-separate pronoun. For example, nahnu, we say nahnu nad'u and nahnu narju. The normal alif turns to waw. Let's take 2 more examples for the restricted alif, like bana and mesha, and conjugating them in the present tense in the same previous subject-separate pronoun. We say nahnu nabni and nahnu namshi. The restricted alif turns to ya. A final remark is that the restricted alif has always to come at the end. You cannot find it at the beginning or at the middle of a word. Talking now about the imperative or command form of the verb in Arabic. It occurs in the second person. I mean all forms of you. Conjugating a verb in the command form is so easy. Let's do it in steps. The first step, we take the verb that we want to conjugate in the command form and we conjugate it first in the present tense in all forms of you. For example, the verb kataba. We say tektubu, tektubin, tektuban, tektubun, and tektubna. The second step is to replace the subject markers placed in the first of the verb by a normal alif. The subject marker is the letter ta with its short vowel. Then we replace it by alif. It becomes uktub, uktubin, uktuban, uktubun, and uktubna. And the final step is whenever there is a noon in the end, you delete it. And if there is no noon, you replace the last vowel by a sukun. So for the singular masculine you, there is no noon in the end. Then we just have to go to the last vowel and replace it with a sukun. It becomes uktub. All the other cases have noon in their ends. So we just have to delete that noon, and they become uktubi for the singular feminine you, uktuba for the dual you, uktubu for the plural masculine you. Here we delete the noon and we add a neglected alif, an alif that we do not pronounce. And finally, for the plural feminine you, we do not delete the noon. It just stays the same. Uktubna. This method is valid for all verbs with slight differences. For now, let's take a defective verb root. I mean a verb that ends with a weak letter. In our case, let's take the verb hada. The first step is to conjugate it in the present tense in all forms of you. تهدي, تهدين, تهديان, تهدون, and تهدين. The second step is replacing the subject marker, ta, in the first by an alif. They become ihdi, ihdin, ihdiyan, ihdun, and ihdin. And the final step is whenever there is a noon in the end, you delete it. And if there is no noon, you replace the last vowel by a sukun. So for singular masculine you, there is no noon in the end. So we just go to the last vowel and replace it with a sukun. But the last vowel here is a long vowel and not a short one. What should we do? In this case, we have to delete this long vowel and it becomes ihdi. The other cases are the same as the previous example. Ihdi, ihdiya, ihdu, and ihdin stays the same. The na in the end of the verb is an object-attached pronoun which means us. So, ihdina is guide us. The command form here is used to invocate of Allah, like asking Him in dua to guide us. Guide us to where? To as-sirat. This word means the path, and it could be written also with sin, as-sirat. How is this path? It is mustaqim. This is an active participle from the verb istaqama, to become straight. So, mustaqim means direct or straight. So, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. As we saw in the last episode, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim means guide us to the straight path. So, as-sirat al-mustaqim is the straight path that doesn't warp. But who are these people whom Allah Ta'ala has guided to the straight path? And here comes our verse. صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. The path of those you have bestowed your favors on them. Let's explain it word by word. صِرَاط, as I said, is a noun that means path. It is here without el, the definite article. So normally it is indefinite, but the rest of the verse defines it. The next word is الَّذِينَ. This is a relative pronoun. Its role is to connect two sentences, especially a nominal and a verbal one. Giving an example, if I want to say, I overcame the one who defeated me, in Arabic is غَلَبْتُ الَّذِي هَزَمَنِي. غَلَبَ is overcame, a verb in the past tense. This tu, which suffixes to a verb in the past tense, is a subject-attached pronoun, which means I. الَّذِي literally means whom, but in Arabic sometimes it could mean just who, and sometimes it could mean the one whom. As in this example, هَزَمَ is defeated, a verb in the past tense, and this ni suffixes to the verb and is an object-attached pronoun that means me. So translating it, it becomes overcame I the one who defeated me. This الذي is the relative pronoun that relates the first part and the second part of the sentence, and it is here for singular masculine. Another example is the country of the girl who visited us. In Arabic is دولة الفتاة التي زارتنا. So, دولة is country. الفتاة is the girl. التي is who. زار is a verb in the past tense, which means he visited. The ta with sukun is a subject-attached pronoun we add to the past tense verb to indicate that we are talking about a girl or a feminine noun. And this na suffixed to the verb is an object-attached pronoun that means us, so it becomes country of the girl who visited us. This التي is the relative pronoun that relates the first part and the second part of the sentence, and this time it is for singular feminine. So, relative pronouns that we have in Arabic are الذي for singular masculine nouns, التي for singular feminine nouns, اللذان for dual masculine nouns that end with ضمة, اللتان for dual feminine nouns that ends with ضمة, الذين for dual masculine nouns that ends with فتحة or كسرة, اللتين for dual feminine nouns that ends with فتحة or كسرة, الذين for plural masculine nouns, اللاتي, اللواتي, and اللائي are all plural feminine nouns. You can use whichever you like. Next is أنعمت. Here we have the verb أنعم plus the subject-attached pronoun ta. أنعم is a verb that means to make somebody live in comfort. Its root letters are nun, ayn, and mim. The verb that comes from these root letters is na'ama, that means to live in comfort. And the noun ni'ma is any beneficence or blessing that Allah Ta'ala gave us. Then, why do we prefix alif plus hamza to a trilateral verb? I will answer this question by giving examples. The verb kharaja is a trilateral verb that means to go out, means to live in comfort, prefixing or alif to be delighted, hamza, and to this verb it becomes to make somebody live in comfort, which means to the take subject-attached or somebody outside is a subject the pronoun verb attached only to verbs is a trilateral that are conjugated in the past tense to sit, which means and prefixing alif for singular masculine to this verb, and the one it becomes by it here is which means to make somebody sit down. The verb غضب is a trilateral verb that means to be angry, and prefixing alif plus hamza to this verb, it becomes أغضب, which means to make somebody angry. I think you see the difference now. So, na'ama, as I said, means to live in comfort or to be delighted, and an'ama means to make somebody live in comfort. The subject-attached pronoun ta is a subject pronoun attached only to verbs that are conjugated in the past tense, which means you for singular masculine, and the one who's meant by it here is Allah Ta'ala. Finally, alayhim. This word is a composition between a preposition, ala, and hum, an attached pronoun that replaces a noun. The preposition ala is what we call harfu jar, and we've already seen two before. The first one is bi, prefixed to ism, name, which means by the name or in the name in Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. And the second one is li, prefixed to Allah in Al-Hamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and it means praise to Allah. In both cases, the nouns come after bi, and li ends with a kasra, And that's the major reason we call them harfu jar, or genitive particle, because they make the nouns that come after them end with a kasra. And that's why we call this noun by ismun majroor, genitive noun. So remember, any noun that ends with a kasra is a genitive noun. Ala is another genitive particle we add to our inventory with bi and li. It means sometimes on and sometimes upon. And him is an attached pronoun that plays the role of the genitive noun that should come after the genitive particle, and it means them. So, alayhim means upon them. Also, ala ends with a restricted alif. But because the restricted alif can come only in the end of a word, we transform it into ya to be able to attach it to a pronoun. Before ending this lesson, I said that the verb an'ama means to make somebody live in comfort, but adding ala to it, like an'ama ala, means to bestow favors upon someone or something. So, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, path of those who you have bestowed favors upon or on them. Then, who are those that Allah bestows favors upon? He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, answers in the 4th surah, the ayah 69.
وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ فَأُولَئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِم مِّنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسُنَ أُولَئِكَ رَفِيقًا.
And whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, those will be with the ones upon whom Allah has bestowed favor of the prophets, the steadfast affirmers of truth, the martyrs, and the righteous, and excellent are those as companions. So those people are An-Nabiyyin, the prophets, As-Siddiqeen, the affirmers of truth, Ash-Shuhada, the martyrs, As-Salihin, the righteous, and وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ, everyone obeys Allah and the Messenger. In the last episode, we said that Allah Ta'ala bestowed His favors upon the prophets, the steadfast affirmers of truth, the martyrs, the righteous, and whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger. In today's ayah, we're gonna talk about people that Allah Ta'ala is angry from, al-maghdubi alayhim. But first, let's explain it word by word. The first word is the noun ghayr. It is used in order to express negative or privative concepts denoting absence of equality or an attribute. In English, it mostly means one of these prefixes, non, un, in, and sometimes not. For instance, munasib is suitable, غير munasib is unsuitable, mubashir is direct, غير مباشر is indirect, عربي is an Arab, غير عربي is a non-Arab, جميل is beautiful, غير جميل is not beautiful, and so forth. So normally, an adjective or participle should come after غير. In our verse, this participle is al-maghdub. This is a passive participle. For now, el is the definite article. After removing it, what remains is maghdub. The root letters of maghdub are ghayn, dad, and ba. The trilateral verb that we can construct from these three letters is ghadiba, which means to be angry. To build an active participle from a trilateral verb, we put the three root letters in the place of 1, 2, and 3 in this pattern. And we've already seen two before. Fatih, the one who or which opens, and Malik, the one who possesses, or the verb غضب, which becomes غاضب, the one who's angry. To build a passive participle from a trilateral verb, we put the root letters in the place of 1, 2, and 3 in this pattern. So, the passive participle of fataha, to open, is maftuh, being opened by someone or something. And the passive participle of malaka, to possess, is mamluk, being possessed by someone or something. Finally, the passive participle of ghadiba, to be angry, is maghdub, evoking anger of someone. Finally, alayhim. We already explained in the last episode that it means on or upon them. Translating غير المغضوب عليهم becomes not of those who have evoked your anger. In the 5th surah, ayah 16 says,
قل هل أنبئكم بشر من ذلك مثوبة عند الله من لعنه الله وغضب عليه وجعل منهم القردة والخنازير وعبد الطاغوت أولئك شر مكانا وأضل عن سواء السبيل.
Say, shall I inform you of what is worse than that as penalty from Allah? It is that of those whom Allah has cursed, and with whom he became angry, and made of them apes and pigs and slaves of Taghut. Those are worse in position and further astray from the sound way. Ulama'ud-Din, religious scholars, say that those who have evoked anger of Allah Ta'ala are people that knew the truth, but they denied it. In the last episode, we said that people who have evoked anger of Allah Ta'ala are people that knew the truth, but they denied it. In today's part of the ayah, we're going to talk about people that went astray, ad-dallun. The first character is the letter waw, with fatha above it, wa. When this particle comes alone, it functions as an adjective term within sentences to link clauses, phrases, and words. We call this connected, harfu atuf, or coordinating conjunction. It plays the role of and in English. In particular, Arabic uses wa in lists where in English a comma would be used to separate each item. For instance, if I want to say, I visited Morocco, Pakistan, Indonesia, India, Japan, and Turkey, in Arabic, it is زرت المغرب وباكستان وإندونيسيا والهند واليابان وتركيا. The next word is لا. This word's meaning differs according to its location in the sentence. If a comma comes after it, it means no, and if it comes before a verb in a present tense, it means don't, and if it comes before a noun, it means the negation of that noun, like لا ريب, no doubt. And finally, if it comes after another negation, it means nor, like in this ayah, غير المغضوب عليهم. غير, neither those who have your evoked anger, ولا الضالين, لا, nor those who go astray. The last word is الضالين. It is a noun in the sound masculine plural form. We've talked before about conditions of transforming a singular masculine noun to plural using the sound masculine plural form. Check the episode of Al-Hamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. The root letters of this noun are Dad, Lam, and Lam. We have two Lam because of the shadda above the character. And the verb that gets constructed from these roots is ضل, which means to go astray. It is a double roots verb. I mean a trilateral verb that its second and third letters are the same. So we merge them into one and we put shadda above. Other verbs with this form are hajja, to go on pilgrimage, and jadda, to be serious. To build an active participle from this form, try to rely on this pattern, putting the three root letters in the place of 1, 2, and 3. So for hajja, its active participle is hajj, a Muslim who has been to Mecca as a pilgrim. And for jadda, its active participle is jad, a serious person. And finally, for dalla, the active participle is dal, an astray person. Because these active participles are characteristics that we give to someone, we can consider them as adjectives. Then, to make them plural using the sound masculine plural form, they have to fulfill two conditions. 1, they should be masculine. 2, they should be for a rational. The three examples fulfill these two conditions, so we can turn them into plural using the sound masculine plural form. How to do that? If the adjective in its singular state ends by a dhamma, in its plural state we add waw and noon to its end. And if the adjective in its singular state ends with a fatha or a kasra, in its plural state we add ya and noon to its end. So al-hajju becomes al-hajjun, and al-jad becomes al-jadin. And finally, al-dal becomes al-dalin. And this is our last word. So, wal-dalin alone means, and not of those who go astray. But because it is one ayah together with the previous part, it becomes nor those who go astray. Then, who are those who went astray? Allah Ta'ala answered in the Surah 5, ayah 77.
ولا تتبعوا أهواء قوم قد ضلوا من قبل وأضلوا كثيرا وضلوا عن سواء السبيل.
And do not follow the inclinations of people who had gone astray before, and misled many, and have strayed from the soundness of the way. So they are people that they didn't know the truth, and they didn't bother themselves to search for it. By this, we finished the whole opening chapter, Surah Al Fatihah. I am thanking Allah Ta'ala for inspiring me to start this work, and I thank FreeQuranEducation family to give me the opportunity to showcase my work. And I thank every person who watched these videos and liked them or shared them with his friends, so that every person and every Muslim on the earth can benefit from them. I look forward to working with you in the coming days. See you next time.